All right, today we're diving into one of the most, well, complicated figures in all of ancient Athens, a guy named Peisistratus. Now, let's be clear, he was a tyrant. He took power illegally. But here's the crazy part. He's also the guy who's credited with setting up Athens for its legendary golden age. So, how on earth does an unconstitutional ruler end up building one of the greatest civilizations in history? Let's get into it. So, to kind of wrap our heads around his appeal, the source material we're looking at makes a really interesting comparison. Picture this: a super wealthy, super charismatic guy, an elite through and through. But he frames himself as the champion of the little guy, the common person. Sound familiar? Yeah, you could say Peisistratos was kind of the original populist strongman. Okay, but to really get Peisistratos, we have to understand the world he was born into. So let's set the stage a bit. We're talking about Athens just after the great reformer Solon had completely turned the tables. The old system, where your family name was everything, gone. In its place was a brand new, kind of chaotic setup where money, not your bloodline, was what really mattered. Now, this new system basically split Athens into three rival groups. First, you've got the plain party. These are your old money aristocrats, and they absolutely hated these new reforms. Then there's the coast party, the new money merchants and middle class who were thriving under the new rules. And finally, you have the hill party. These were the poor farmers and laborers, the ones who felt like they got the short end of the stick, and all they wanted was a piece of land to call their own. This three-way fight was literally tearing the city apart. And right into the middle of all this chaos steps Peisistratus. I mean, this guy was the total package: an aristocrat, good-looking, charming, and already a national hero by the time he was 30 for capturing the island of Salamis. But here's the real shocker. Instead of siding with his own kind, the elites, he throws in his lot with the underdog, the poorest, weakest group, the hill party. Now, his journey to the top was anything but simple. It was a total roller coaster, really. A story of failing, getting knocked down, and just refusing to stay down. So let's look at his career as this wild three-act drama. A bunch of rises, a couple of nasty falls, and then one final, perfectly planned comeback. Just look at this timeline. It shows you just how bumpy the ride was. So let's start with round one, back in 561 BCE. He actually manages to grab power, but he's young. He doesn't have a deep power base, and the two big parties, the plain and the coast, they team up and kick him out almost immediately. A total bust. But you see, Peisistratos was a clever guy. After only a year in exile, what happens? The plain and coast parties start fighting each other, of course. The leader of the coast party gets an idea. He goes to Peisistratos and says, "Hey, marry my daughter and we'll rule Athens together." Peisistratos says, "Deal." He comes back to power, but then he refuses to be anyone's puppet. His new father-in-law is furious, so he turns around, teams up with the plain party again, and boom, Peisistratus is exiled for a second time. But here's where it gets really fascinating. Think about this. This was a purely political marriage, right? But his new wife, the daughter of the guy who just exiled him, she actually chooses to go with him into exile. It just shows you the kind of magnetic personality this guy had. As the writer Shiono Nanami said, a man popular with the masses is also popular with women. Seems like she hit the nail on the head. So, this second exile, it lasts for 10 years, a full decade. But this wasn't him licking his wounds. Oh no, this was his reinvention. You could argue this was the most important time in his entire life. This is where he stops being just a charming politician and turns himself into a real, undeniable power broker. So how'd he do it? 3 key steps. First, he gets into business and gets really good at it. He's operating lucrative mines, buying up land. Basically, he becomes fabulously wealthy. Second, he uses those business dealings to build a huge network of powerful friends all across the Aegean. And third, with all that money, what does he do? He hires his own private army of mercenaries. He was literally building the arsenal he needed for his final comeback. So then, in 546 BCE, he comes back. And by now, the people of Athens they're sick of it. They're exhausted from all the infighting between the rich guys. So when Peisistratus shows up with his army, the city basically welcomes him with open arms. He takes power for the third and final time, and what's incredible is nobody died. It was a completely bloodless conquest. Okay, so now he's the tyrant, the guy in charge without any legal right to be. The big question is, how do you hold on to power this time? How do you stop another rebellion? Well, this is where we get into the playbook of the gentle tyrant. And you're going to see his political genius really shine through and how he figured out how to rule without looking like he was ruling. His whole strategy was substance over form. What does that mean? Well, on the outside, everything looked the same. The citizen assemblies kept meeting, the councils were still there, the 9 archons were still in charge, all the democratic stuff Solon set up, still there. People were free to debate and criticize, but in reality, everybody knew who was really calling the shots. His ideas always went to the top of the pile. His will was state policy. It's a move that Roman emperors like Augustus would basically copy-paste centuries later. But he still had one massive problem to solve. Those old rivals, the plain and coast parties, the landowners and the big-time merchants, they still controlled the entire economic engine of Athens. So how in the world do you neutralize guys like that? His solution was, frankly, both brilliant and totally ruthless. He didn't even bother fighting them on their own turf. He just made them obsolete. He took that personal economic empire he built during his decade in exile and used it to create a parallel system, one that he controlled completely. I mean, what he did was a masterclass in economic hardball. He used his own farms and mines to flood the market with goods, which undercut the prices of the big landowners in the plain party. Then, he called up all those powerful friends he'd made and set up his own shipping routes, completely bypassing the merchants of the coast party. He became the producer, the distributor, and the seller, all in one. He took over the whole supply chain and just squeezed his rivals out of the picture. So, with his power now totally secure, Peisistratos could finally get down to his real work. This is where we see how he didn't just seize power, he used it to forge a golden age. He unleashed this incredible wave of reforms that was going to turn Athens from just another squabbling city-state into a genuine Mediterranean superpower. First things first, he made good on his oldest promise. He took the land from the elites he'd kicked out and gave it to the poor farmers of the hill party. Then he created a new, super stable silver coin, the drachma. He shifted the whole economy away from just farming and towards high-value crafts. He started a massive building program, remaking Athens in marble, and he poured money into arts and culture. And hey, if you want a sense of his long-term impact, just look at that new coin of his. The silver drachma was so solid, so trustworthy, that it became the go-to currency for international trade for the next 200 years. That's how you build an economic empire. His economic thinking was honestly way ahead of its time. He knew Athens couldn't survive forever just by growing olives, so he pushed for high-end manufacturing, especially gorgeous, artistic pottery. Pretty soon, Athenian vases were the luxury item to own all over the Mediterranean. This completely changed the city's economy, moving it towards skilled, high-profit work. And he got something else too, that a truly great city needs a great culture. So what did he do? He started the very first public library in the Greek world. He paid to have the first official written versions of Homer's epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey, created. And he started this huge public festival, the city Dionysia, which is where, get this, Greek tragedy was born, one of the greatest art forms in human history. So, where does that leave us? How do you even begin to sum up a guy like Peisistratus? Let's try to wrap our heads around his legacy. We're stuck with this incredible contradiction, right? A guy who broke all the rules to get power, but then used that power to build one of the most amazing cities the world has ever seen. I mean, you can't argue with the results. Under his rule, Athens got so big and so powerful that its #1 rival, Sparta, got nervous. So nervous, in fact, that they had to create the Peloponnesian League, this huge military alliance, pretty much just to try and counterbalance Athens. You know you're a big deal when your enemies have to form a team just to deal with you. The historian Will Durant might have said it best. He described Peisistratos as having a rare combination of culture and wisdom, talent and charm. Yeah, he was a tyrant, no doubt about it, but man, was he a brilliant one. And that brings us to one last really tough question. The way he got power was illegal. His rule was, by definition, illegitimate. But what he built was spectacular. So it forces you to wonder, can a golden age born from an illegal power grab ever be truly legitimate? It's a heavy question, and it's one that didn't just apply to ancient Athens. It's a question we're still grappling with today.